Welcome. Licensed games have got a bit of a bad reputation, particularly during the PlayStation 2 era, when it seemed we were getting a new one every single day. But I say licensed games can be good. You just need to choose the right ones. So with that, let me give you part 1 of my little series of some of the best licensed games on PlayStation 2. The Godfather, released 2006, based on the famous 1972 film. And I don't envy the guys who worked on this, because to try and make a game of one of the greatest films of all time was always going to be a tall order. What they've done, I think, was the best thing they could do, and rather than just try and follow the film's script, they invented a new, non-canon character called Aldo. You're recruited into the Corleone family and work your way up through the ranks. Oh, and it just so happens you're out for revenge as well. The game does follow the story of the film, but you're seeing the events from Aldo's perspective. So for example, the infamous horse's head scene is still in the game, but it's just from this character's perspective instead, which is a nice little twist. Gameplay wise, this has been called a GTA clone, and I can see why. It's definitely taken, let's say, inspiration from the GTA games, as a lot did in this era, but it's done well, and now it's just the sort of standard formula for an open world game. As with the majority of licensed products, it's going to be story heavy, because that's the whole point of it. It's the story of The Godfather. This actually features Marlon Brando's last voice role. He recorded some dialogue for Vito Corleone. Not much of what he recorded was used, unfortunately, because due to ill health, a lot of it didn't turn out fantastically. But it is technically his last acting role, which makes it a little bit special because, let's face it, one of the great legends of the screen there. Definitely a must-play for fans of gangster games like the Mafia games, or just open world games as well. It's great fun. They did release a sequel, part 2, on the 7th generation, which isn't bad, but this is definitely the superior out of the two. If you haven't seen the film, don't worry about having to watch it to understand the game. You don't need to at all. But if you haven't seen the film, I do question why, because it is one of the greats after all. The Matrix, The Path of Neo. This is a sequel to the 2003 game Enter the Matrix, which isn't bad, but this one is better in my opinion. Released 2 years later in 2005. The game was actually written and co-directed by, I always struggle saying this, the Wachowskis. So the story is absolutely spot on. It really is a superb reimagining of the Matrix films in video game format, and the cutscenes look great. Well, for the age of the console and the time it was out, of course. This game is the best Matrix one so far, at least, and definitely the one that gives you the best feeling of being Neo, as you play through some of the iconic action scenes from the film, pulling off the moves we've all seen and know. It's just a great time to be had. Sci-fi fans, jump on this.
By the Wachowski brothers. You are the one. In stores November 8th.
Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. I love Indiana Jones. Not so much for Dial of Destiny, but I love Indiana Jones in everything else. Actually, Crystal Skull was a bit. I like the first 3 Indiana Jones films. Indiana Jones is what gave me, and I dare say many others, a love for stories based on historical mysteries, be it from the Da Vinci Code to Tomb Raider games and everything else in between. So of course, when they make a game starring one of my favourite heroes, I'm going to play it. And it really did live up to my expectations. This is actually a prequel to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, so it's early Indiana Jones. The tomb mentioned in the title is the tomb of China's first emperor, and I'm going to try and pronounce his name, but no offence intended if I get it wrong, Qin Shi Huang. In my opinion, this game captures the spirit of indie absolutely perfectly. The story itself is worthy of being one of the early Indiana Jones films, you know, the good ones. Action-wise, there's plenty of it. It does play a little bit like a Tomb Raider game, however, I think personally there's a bit more action and a bit less platforming. There's definitely a lot more hand-to-hand stuff and brawling as well as gunplay, of course. And don't forget that trusty whip. I absolutely love this game. It's one of my favourite PS2 games, definitely in the top 10. Definitely worth a shout.
Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. Live the adventure.
Wait, hold on a minute. We're not done with Indy yet, because there is also another game. Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings. This one actually reviewed a little bit better, but honestly, I just lumped them both together. So when I say that the other one's in my top 10 games, I mean both of them, because they play very similarly, but they do have a very different story, and they're both absolutely brilliant. Again, it fully captures not just the spirit of Indy, but the type of adventures he goes on, the spirit of the first 3 films. This is what I love about licensed games. If you truly enjoy a franchise, but you've consumed, say, all the films about it, and you want more, well, you can get more through games. This is another full Indiana Jones adventure. So if you don't want to watch the films again, you can get another full adventure with an original story just by playing this game. This came out also on the PSP, and I've recently just replayed it on that console. It's not as good as the PS2 version, but it's still enormous fun. This time, we're stopping the Nazis getting the staff that Moses used to part the Red Sea, and it's another globe-trotting adventure. It might look a little bit better graphically, I'll let you decide on that one. I think maybe slightly. I may be looking at this through rose-coloured glasses, but for me, these are some of my favourite games ever on the PS2. And from the big screen to the small screen, this is a game based on a TV series, Alias. Don't know if any of you remember it, but it was absolutely fantastic and is still good fun. I've been rewatching it on Disney Plus lately. It stars Jennifer Garner in her breakout role as Sydney Bristow, a spy, and it is a fantastic spy drama. So, of course, lends itself nicely to video games. This game's got everything you could want from an espionage thriller of a game. You've got guns, you've got hand-to-hand combat, you've got stealth sections, sneaking around, uncovering massive conspiracies, and colourful characters throughout. Sydney Bristow takes on various different guises to infiltrate different areas, with, ultimately, a nice little variety of mission objectives as well. I wish we had more spy games like this, because it is enormous fun. This next game is another small screen breakout role for a gorgeous girl kicking butt and looking good while doing it. Dark Angel was Jessica Alba's breakout role, and also Michael Weatherly of NCIS fame. It only lasted for 2 seasons, which is an absolute tragedy, so any other type of media I can get about it, I'm up for, because it was great. The story is original, obviously based on the property, so you are getting more of the franchise, not just a repetition of it in video game format. You play as Max, a genetically enhanced super soldier, and you're hiding from the organisation that made you, because you don't want to be their weapon, you want to be your own person. So you've got to defeat them, and anybody working with them as well, because the last thing you want is to be taken in. Fortunately, thanks to all the genetic enhancements and training, you're one tough cookie. You are a combat expert, and this does play as a beat-em-up game. This is one of those games where you will get a lot more out of it if you've seen the series before you play it. And it's a great series anyway, so why miss out? Why not give it a go? But it is great fun. It's definitely a fan service for those of us which were disappointed that it ended so soon and wanted some more. So they gave it to us. Any licensed properties, spin-offs, video games, etc. should be just that, a service to the fans who want more. And I think they did this quite well, even if the stealth sections are rather annoying. And now a game based on possibly the greatest television heroine of all time, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There's been so much said about how influential this series was and just how good it is still to this very day. There are 5 games based on the series, and I did do a video featuring all 5 games, which I'll put on the end screen in case you want to check it out. I consider this to be just about the best, although they're all pretty good actually. You get to play not just as Buffy, but you can also play as some other characters like Willow and even Sid the Dummy for a small section. It's an original story, it features the original characters, all the ones you know and love, and it is just absolutely brilliant from start to finish. If you want to play a game in Buffy's world, this is the one to get. Although, as I said, the others are good too. Batman Begins. There are actually 3 Batman games that I know of on the PS2. All good, this is my favourite. And you can see, whilst it is before the Arkham games, that the Arkham games took influence from it, particularly with how the combat's done. But also it's got the dark, gritty atmosphere and character from the film and from the comics. Batman was never meant to be all sunshine and rainbows. He's traumatised from childhood from seeing his parents murdered. He is a dark character out to avenge in the night and instill fear on his enemies. And he does a good job. And if that's not enough, you get to be in the Batmobile. This is the last time we got to go and be Batman driving a Batmobile until Arkham Knight. The Batmobile sequences in this are linear, but they're some of my favourite parts as well. All in all, can't recommend this enough. The only reason that we didn't get a sequel to tie up with the second film in the trilogy is because we got Arkham Asylum instead, which of course kicked off some of the greatest superhero games ever. Spider-Man 2. It is very hard to overstate just what a big leap forward this game was. For starters, it was the first 3D Spider-Man game where you could go all the way from the top of the buildings down to street level. The first truly open world Spider-Man game. And it featured what was at the time phenomenal swinging mechanics. You actually felt like you were swinging off the buildings rather than just shooting web into the sky. It was amazing and still to this very day holds up. It gave you the best feel of being Spider-Man we'd ever had and possibly got until 2018's Marvel's Spider-Man. That's how good this game is. Obviously it's based on the film, but they added in so much extra content. I would say it's loosely based on the film. There's lots of extra enemies and characters from the Spider-Man universe as well. It's its own sort of very large, enormous thing. When we talk about games pushing the open world genre further, especially of this generation, you always jump to Grand Theft Auto 3, and I'm not diminishing what that did. Amazing game, definitely pushed things forward at the time, that's why it was so heavily emulated. But Spider-Man 2 was the first truly open world game that also gave us vertical open world, because of course with Spider-Man, sky's the limit. And that makes it very special and a real achievement. Phenomenal game, one of the best open world games on the PS2, which isn't a Grand Theft Auto game. .007 Nightfire. I've always liked James Bond, I've always liked the Bond games. I think there's more on the PS2 than there are on any other console, and this is actually my favourite James Bond game ever. And it stars the likeness and voice talent of my second favourite Bond, Pierce Brosnan. My favourite, of course, being Sean Connery, the best Bond ever. No debate can be had there. It's an original story, worthy of being a James Bond film. It's got the larger-than-life characters, it's got the globe-trotting, and an Aston Martin kitted out with gadgets. What more could you want? Thoroughly enjoyable from the start to the end. The first-person perspective works beautifully. The action sequences, the combat is very much a first-person shooter, but there are other aspects as well. Obviously, I've mentioned the driving parts. There's also some sneaking around to be done, infiltrating places. There's some hacking to get information. All good, solid spy craft. And this game deserves to be in any Bond fan's collection. The story alone is worth owning it for. So good. The X-Files, Resist or Serve. If ever there was a TV series which lent itself to being turned into a survival horror game, this is it. You can play through as either Mulder or Scully, your choice, or you can play it twice and play through as each character. There are some slightly different bits, mainly if you play as Scully, because of course she's got the sciencey stuff that she does in the lab. The story in this one, absolutely brilliant, definitely worthy of being an episode of the TV show, or maybe one of the movies, because they made a couple of those as well, didn't they? if you like the X-Files, you're definitely going to love this. But even if you haven't seen it, or you haven't seen it for a long time, it's still a game you'll enjoy, just if you like a survival horror game. It's very well written, the characters are great, and it's a good time from start to finish. Very overlooked hidden gem, in my humble opinion. And that is the end of part 1. Part 2 and 3 are on their way, so if you want to see those, subscribe. If you don't, subscribe anyway, because I do plenty of other stuff. As always, thank you very much for taking the time to watch my little video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you very, very soon. Ta-da for now.